Hey everybody, what's going on? What's hot? What's hip? What's happening? What is shaking on your Tuesday? Man, we got a lot to cover today. We have so much to cover. I am going to tell you about, well, an assassination not many people talk about at parties. That's the assassination of President William McKinley. And if you could like, share, subscribe, retweet, all that free stuff, man, we'd really appreciate it. Down at the bottom in the crawl, you will see that you can turn on your gifted memberships. People like to gift around yonder. So that would be a great way to get a membership for free to the show. And you know what Facebook did? Not Facebook, YouTube did. In the pre-show, we always have a little chat, and that's what you see at the start of the show over the video, right? So, like, not once, not twice, not three times, not four times, 5 times, they said my comments were spam. My comments. Host of the show. They're supposed to be helping, but they're not helping. They're seriously not helping. What's this here say? Aku says, tonight I ain't Mr. Lucky Rusty Kia with tri-coat white paint. Why would you repair a Kia? Anyway, not you, but the people who, you know what I'm saying. So I am so excited right now to show you some stuff. SG fanboy, who's just been generous to a fault on this show. Incidentally, I did watch Endgame before the show started. He's done wonderful things here. He's just wonderful things, just amazingly wonderful things. And I'm going to show you those wonderful things right now. He saw some of them yesterday. There's more of them today. And I'm so flattered. Check this out. Now, I think that's Captain America. It could be Hawkeye. So I'm sure SG will tell me. I just can't. They all wear the same. It could be Hawkeye. It could be Hawkeye. I don't know. Just stop spamming the comments. Oh, it's Thor. Thor. Well, I didn't recognize this. That's Thor. That's me as Thor. And I think I know where he found a picture of me without any glasses on. But Hungus Mungus says, just stop spamming the comments, Tom. Yeah, silly me. Money. That's the reason Aku fixes some of these vehicles. I love this one. And a lot of people would say, well, you can't love them. You know what? I'm going to make myself a little teeny tinier here so you guys can get the full picture. A lot of people would say, Tom, a big, giant, 6'5" macho guy like you should not like this one, but I love this one. This is Scarlet Witch, Tom Gully, which I think is great. Incidentally, if you listen to the director's comments on Endgame, Scarlet Witch is the most dangerous to Thanos because of her red power that she has and the amount that she has. They make that comment that of all of the Avengers, she is the one that's the most dangerous to him. And that makes sense because she destroys his big whatever. And she's the one that gets him in her power that makes him rain fire from his ship. So that makes sense. Okay, here's another one I'm not 100% sure on. This to me looks like Tony Stark because of the hair. It looks like Tony Stark to me. And that's just one of the Tony Starks. Just one of them. Yes. Oh, they keep coming, folks. Oh, now that is Hawkeye. That is Hawkeye. Okay. Yeah. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. Diane O'Brien is having a good time. That's good. Hungus Mungus is laughing. That's good. Diana says, the wrath of Thor. Aku says, spam comments. I'll hold tests. Stuttering John is competent, honest, fair person. Anything on your end, Tom? No, they've been letting some of them through. But they should let all of them through. Now, this I know is Tony Stark. And I am Gully Man. Snap. Yes, there I am. I love these. Okay, now this one might engender some controversy. However, Gully Conda forever. There's Tom Gully Black Panther. I love it, man. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's the greatest. Thank you so much for doing that, SG. Those are great. Those are absolutely great. Yeah, those are just fabulous. That made my day. Absolutely made my day. I got to take one of these. I'm going to take the Thor one out of my studio because I got to add something. Because, StreamYard only lets me have so many images in my studio. Because that makes sense. Let me put this last William McKinley assassination image in, and we're good. All right, let's get to some more of these comments. Greetings, everyone. Most cheerful chat room on the internet. It's been verified by independent sources. That's the Reverend Wild Bill. He's here with us. Hungus Mungus. Jokerfish. Every time I see Jokerfish, I'm going to go, Joker, Joker, Joker. People saying hi. People just saying hi. Because that's what we do here. The Rev says, Tom, have you done your thing yet? Well, it's not did my thing. I got to open my thing. There's a difference. There's a big difference between doing my thing and opening my thing. You know what I'm saying? William McKinley, Mount McKinley used to be named after him. But when you don't have a good enough assassination, they rename it Denali because that was the original Inuit name for it. I just know if you fall off it, you're in big trouble. Aku says, why, Kia? Why you rot so badly? Demi, why you do this to me, Demi? What movie? Somebody tell me what movie in the comments there. Just tell me what movie in the comments, and nobody gets hurt. Oh, by the way, behind me is the very last speech of William McKinley, and if you see right here, right there, kind of, well, you can't see my finger because of the green screen, but that's William McKinley in the big white shirt and the tux. He wore it. Wild Bill got it. He got it right out of the gate. Exorcist. Demi, why you do this to me, Demi? John's Earmites, which is an awesome screen name, says Star Wars. No, nothing associated with me would ever be Star Wars. I don't appreciate Star Wars. All right, Dan. Let's go ahead and let's get into this McKinley assassination, shall we? Yeah. The Joker, by the way, William McKinley was a snappy dresser, and I love all these. This is only 20 years since the assassination we covered last week of James Abram Garfield. 20 years later. It's only 20 years later. So we've still got, I'm going to have some other photos for you, but we still have a lot of artists' depictions of the assassination. We're still in that. Bill, could you draw me up an assassination illustration, please? Well, I think it kind of went like this. Look, I'll draw some stick figures. Anyway, so back in September of 1901, William McKinley was at the height of his power as president. He was elected in 1896 during a really bad economic depression, resulting from the panic of 1893, which nobody remembers anymore. But he defeated his Democratic rival, William Jennings Bryan, who was known as a great orator. If you've ever seen the movie Inherit the Wind, he's kind of portrayed in that. But he was known as a great speech maker, ran for president a bunch of times, never won. He was Secretary of State, though, at one point. Anyway, McKinley gets the country back to prosperity, and they win the Spanish-American War in 1898. That's where we got Puerto Rico and the Philippines, huh? So he was easily reelected in a rematch against William Jennings Bryan, and it looked as if the McKinley administration would continue peaceably unbroken for another 4 years. It was a government that was dedicated to prosperity, and it was kicking some serious, what's the word for it the kids use today? Boute Bout in the accomplishment of prosperity. So McKinley's original vice president, a guy named Garrett Hobart, died in 1899, and he said, look, I'm going to leave the choice of who my vice president is up to the convention. You know, we have political conventions before a presidential election. He said, I'm going to leave it up to you. And that is how Assistant Secretary to the Navy, Teddy Roosevelt, was nominated as vice president. And Roosevelt accepted it, and he was elected in the landslide McKinley victory. Now, let's get to the villain in our little passion play, shall we? This is a gentleman. Thank you, StreamYard. Please, no, just leave the circle up there for half an hour. I don't care. This is a gentleman named Leon Czolgosz. Leon Czolgosz. And he not a good guy. All right? He was born in Detroit in 1873. His parents were Polish immigrants, and they moved all around because Leon's father was seeking work throughout the Midwest. And when Leon grew up, he worked in a factory in Cleveland until he lost his job in a labor dispute. And then he worked sort of irregularly and attended big political and religious meetings, trying to understand the reasons for what I mentioned earlier, the Panic of 1893. And while he was doing this, he became interested in anarchism, anarchy, you know. Anarchism, it's against all forms of authority, wants to abolish all institutions, basically chaos. So by 1901, this anarchy movement was feared throughout the United States, and New York's highest court had ruled that the simple act of saying, I'm an anarchist, in front of an audience was a breach of the peace. It was a real thing that was going on. There were people that were into it, and the government and the populace in general was terrified of this. They were like, anarchy, we have to have order. That's what's brought us prosperity. So anarchists had, not just in this country, but over in Europe, gained quite a following. And in Europe, anarchists had assassinated or attempted to assassinate about a half a dozen officials and members of royal houses. And they'd been blamed for the 1886 Haymarket bombing in Chicago. So we'd had two other presidents that were assassinated in the 19th century, and one just 20 years earlier. Even considering that, President McKinley did not like security personnel to come between him and the people. And I'm going to show you an illustration of that very, very soon. In his hometown of Canton, Ohio, he often walked to church or the business district by himself, no protection. And in Washington, he went on drives with his wife without any guard in the carriage, just got in and went on down the street, you know. So McKinley gave a short speech at his second inauguration, March 4th, 1901. They inaugurated later than we did back when because the votes were harder to get together for reasons. And he was an advocate of protective tariffs, and he passed a bunch of them in his first year in office, and that actually helped the nation reach prosperity. He tariffed goods from other countries, and because they couldn't come into the country, American companies thrived because they got to make those products. And that also opened foreign markets to U.S. manufacturers, okay? So during a long trip planned for months after his inauguration, he was going to make major speeches promoting his plan, and that was going to end up with an address at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo on June the 13th. McKinley and his wife, Ida married her, get it? Anyway, and their official party left on the 29th of April and went and did a bunch of stuff. And they were going to conclude in Buffalo, like I mentioned, with that speech on what had been designated President's Day. And he was met with absolute adoration, rapturous receptions throughout the far West, where many people had never seen a United States president. In California, however, the First Lady, Ida, became seriously ill, and they thought she was going to die. She recovered in San Francisco, but her husband canceled the remainder of the tour, and they returned to Washington. The speech at the exposition was postponed until September 5th, after McKinley was in Washington for a few weeks and then in his hometown of Canton, Ohio. And he used this time in Ohio working on the speech and supervising improvements to his house, whatever that's worth. And he had intended to stay in Canton until October. Well, Leon Czolgosz there lived on his parents' farm near Cleveland in 1898, and he hardly worked. He may have had a nervous breakdown. They don't really know. We know that he attended a speech by legendary anarchist Emma Goldman in May of 1901 in Cleveland. And he approached her before the speech and asked her to recommend some books, and she did. And in the talk, in which Goldman did not advocate violence but expressed understanding for those driven to it, that talk was a big influence on Czolgosz, and he later said that her words burned in his head. Okay. He came to see her at Chicago, at her home in July, as she was getting ready to go to Buffalo herself to see the fair, and those two anarchists rode together to the train station. So Emma Goldman expressed concern to another radical person, that Czolgosz, who was using an alias, he was going by the name Fred Neiman, was following her around, and soon after he left Chicago. And there was a worker at a park in Canton that said he'd seen a man resembling Czolgosz in mid-1901 when the president was at home and sometimes visiting the park, and this man was wearing, very prominently, 2 guns. And when Arntz reminded him that firearms were not permitted outside the park shooting range, he responded the guy with, tell your story walking, I don't care. And Arntz went to get the police, but the man was never found. So, on September the 3rd, Czolgosz went to Walbridge's hardware store in Buffalo on the main street and purchased a .32 caliber Ivor Johnson revolver. And apparently he had not established a clear plan to assassinate the president, but the following day, William and his wife, Ida, arrived in Buffalo by train. Cannon fires a salute, and that cannon was set too close to the track, and the explosions blew out several windows on the train, which unnerved the First Lady, who seems a little skittish. About a dozen people on the platform, believing the damage was caused by a bomb, shouted, "Anarchists!" I'm telling you, anarchists were a real thing in the early 1900s. And William McKinley stepped down from the train to official welcome. Czolgosz shoved his way toward the president, forward through the crowd, but he found that the president was too well guarded to make an attempt on his life. So, when given the opportunity to host a public reception for McKinley, the fair organizers in Buffalo chose to site it at the Temple of Music. Louis L. Babcock, the Grand Marshal of the exposition, regarded the building as perfect for this purpose. It was a large auditorium, and it was close to the Esplanade, which was at the heart of the fair, had doorways on all 4 sides, rows of chairs on the floor, spacious galleries. And he spent the morning, this Babcock guy, of September 6th, making some arrangements for the reception. The floor seating was removed to create a big aisle that would run across that particular area, and to the point where McKinley would stand. Once members of the public shook hands with McKinley, they would continue on to exit the building. So he was kind of there receiving people. An American flag was draped behind the president to screen him from behind and for decoration. And there were potted plants there to make it all nicey-nicey. And it was one of the main architectural features of the fair, as we would say. So they made actually a lot of arrangements for his security. I better show you another picture here because we're getting down to it. This is the last known photograph of William McKinley as he is walking up the stairs to enter the Temple of Music. Okay. So they made all these security arrangements, right? And exposition police were stationed at the doors. Detectives from the Buffalo Police guarded that aisle that people could go up and meet him at. In addition to his usual Secret Service agent, George Foster, 2 other agents had been assigned to the Buffalo trip because of security concerns. This Babcock guy that was running the fair he was made nervous by a joke at lunch in an exposition restaurant that the president might be shot during the reception. And he arranged for a dozen artillerymen to attend the reception in full dress uniform, intending to use them as decoration. And instead, he had them stand in the aisle with instructions to close in on any suspicious looking person who might approach the president. Now, these men were not trained in police work, and all they did was kind of crowd the area in front of the president and obstruct the views of the detectives and the Secret Service. At these events, the Secret Service agent, George Foster, usually just stood to the left and behind McKinney. That's all. He kind of just looked out from there. And another person wanted to stand there to be able to introduce anyone he knew in the line to the president. And so Foster and another Secret Service agent stood across the aisle from McKinley. And you find this with a lot of assassinations is the normal plans got messed with a little bit. So throughout the afternoon, crowds filled the floor outside the blocked off aisle and the galleries wanting to see the president. Even if they couldn't greet him, they wanted to see him. McKinley arrived just on time, as you can see from the photo. He looked at the arrangements. He walked over to his place, and the Star-Spangled Banner is beginning to play as McKinley ordered the doors open to admit those who had waited to greet him. And this dude, first of all, look how dapper he was. He was a dapper fella. This is a photo that was taken sort of before he entered the hall. And this photo, you can see him on the right, is him greeting people as they were entering or waiting outside the Temple of Music. So about halfway through the allotted, well, first of all, let's get to this. McKinley was an experienced politician, and he could shake hands with 50 people a minute, gripping their hands first so to guide them past him quickly. He was like, and to prevent his fingers from being squeezed, he kind of take their hand and grab, yes, nice to meet you. Yes, nice to meet you. So he's moving them along, right? And as the reception continues, the organist plays John Sebastian Bach. The procession of people shaking hands with the president was interrupted when 12-year-old Myrtle Ledger of Springbrook, New York, was accompanied by her mother, and they asked McKinley for the red carnation that he always wore on his lapel because he was a dapper dude. Now, the president, he's a politician. He gave it to her. And then he proceeded shaking hands without his trademark good luck piece. The red carnation was something he considered a good luck piece. Secret Service men looked suspiciously on a tall, swarthy man who appeared restless as he walked toward the president, but he shook hands with McKinley without incident and began to move toward the exit. Now, the usual rule was those who approached the president must do so with their hands open and empty, and that was not being enforced, perhaps due to the heat of the day, as several people were using handkerchiefs to wipe their brows. The man who followed the swarthy guy, not the swarthy guy, but the guy who followed him, had his hand wrapped in something as if injured. McKinley sees this. The guy's got his right hand wrapped up, and he reaches for his left hand instead. As the two men's hands touched at 4:07 p.m., that second guy, his hand wrapped up, was Leon Czolgosz. And he shot McKinley twice in the abdomen with that .32 Iver Johnson revolver that he had concealed under his handkerchief. And they even in the papers went so far as to illustrate how he did it. And that's how he did it. How the assassin concealed the revolver in his kerchief, his handkerchief. As onlookers gazed on in horror and McKinley lurched forward a step, Czolgosz prepared to take a third shot, and he was prevented from doing so when James Parker, an American of African and Spanish descent from Georgia, who'd been behind, he was the guy behind Czolgosz in line, slammed into the assassin, reaching for the gun. A split second after Parker struck Czolgosz, so did Buffalo Detective John Geary and one of the artillerymen, Francis O'Brien. Czolgosz is immediately, he disappears behind a pile of men, some of whom are punching him and hitting him with rifle butts. He was heard to say, "I done my duty." McKinley staggered backwards and to the right, but he was prevented by falling by some of the men that were there, including Detective Geary, and they guided him across some fallen bunting to a chair. The president tried to convince these people he was not seriously injured, but blood was visible as he tried to expose his injury. Seeing the pummeling, just the absolute butt kicking that was being delivered to Leon Czolgosz, McKinley ordered it stopped. Czolgosz was dragged away, but not before being searched by Secret Service agent Foster. When Czolgosz kept turning his head to watch the president while being searched, Foster struck him to the ground with one punch. He didn't like that. After stopping the beating of Czolgosz, William McKinley's next concern was for his wife. Urging a gentleman that was with him named Cortelyou, "My wife, be careful, Cortelyou. How you tell her, oh, be careful." So he's saying, be careful how you tell her I was shot. The initial crowd reaction had been a panic and an attempt to flee the hall, which was frustrated by others surging forward to see what had happened. As McKinley was carried out on a stretcher to an electric-powered ambulance, there was a moan from the crowd at the sight of the president's ashen face. I mean, he'd been shot twice. Secret Service agent Foster rode with him on the way to the Fairs Hospital, and on the way there, McKinley felt in his clothing and came out with a metal object. "I believe that is a bullet," said McKinley. He'd been shot twice. One bullet had deflected off a button and only grazed him. The other had penetrated his abdomen. Let me just show you the operating room they took William McKinley to. Okay, is everybody ready? Is everybody ready for this operating room? Okay. Looks like a place they make sausage to me, but that was the operating room. There you go. Rather primitive, eh? The ambulance carrying McKinley reached the Exposition Hospital. Yes, there was a hospital at the Exposition at 4:25 p.m. So roughly 17 minutes, 18 minutes after he'd been shot. Although it only dealt usually with minor medical issues of fairgoers, people falling down, heat prostration, things like that, the hospital did have an operating room, an operating theater, they call it sometimes. At the time of the shooting, no fully qualified doctor was at the hospital, just nurses and interns. The best surgeon in the city and the Exposition's medical director, Roswell Park, he was in Niagara Falls performing a delicate neck operation. When interrupted during that procedure and told he was needed in Buffalo, he responded that he couldn't leave, even for the President of the United States, because of this neck operation. It was extremely, extremely delicate. He was then told who had been shot, So his response was, "I can't leave even for the President." Yeah, well, the President's the guy that's been shot. Park, 2 weeks later, would save the life of a woman who suffered injuries almost identical to McKinley's, by the way. First physician to arrive at the hospital was Herman Minter, whom the president had met briefly the previous day. The wounded McKinney, who had a good memory for faces. This guy was just a consummate politician. Joked that when he had met Minter, he had not expected to need his professional services. So he's still talking. He can still recognize people. As McKinley lay on the operating table, he said of Czolgosz, he didn't know, poor fellow, what he was doing. He couldn't have known. So he's got compassion for his assassin. This William McKinley guy was pretty awesome, if you ask me. With Park unavailable, and with the fading afternoon light, the major source of illumination in the operating room, upon the arrival of another surgeon, Matthew D. Mann, the decision was made to operate at once to try to remove the remaining bullet. Minter had given McKinley an injection of morphine and strychnine to ease his pain, and Mann, a noted gynecologist without experience in abdominal wounds, administered ether to sedate McKinley as the wounded man, McKinley, was muttering the Lord's Prayer. For hundreds of years, abdominal wounds had meant death by gangrene or other infection, with doctors unable to do little more than ease the pain. Only 17 years previously, Emil Kocher, a Swiss surgeon, had been the first to successfully operate on a patient who had received an abdominal wound of this nature. So to increase the lighting, sunlight was reflected onto the wound by another physician toward the end of the surgery. They managed to find an electric light and rig it. The hospital lacked basic surgical equipment such as retractors. McKinley's condition is weakening, and Mann could do little probing of the wound to find the bullet. His work was complicated by the fact the president was heavy, was obese. The surgeon made an incision in the president's skin and found and removed a small piece of cloth, which was embedded in his flesh. And he probed with his finger and hand, finding damage to the digestive system. The stomach had an entry and an exit wound. Mann sewed up both of those holes, but couldn't find the bullet itself. And he figured it had lodged in the president's back muscles. He later wrote, "A bullet, once it ceases to move, does little harm." A primitive X-ray machine was on display at the fair, but it wasn't used on McKinley, and Mann stated later that he might have used it, except that it could have disturbed the patient, and he didn't think it would do any good. He used black silk thread to stitch the incision and the wound without any drainage, and he covered the area with a bandage. As the operation concluded, this super doctor, Park, he arrives from Niagara Falls, and he was unwilling to interfere. At 5:20, McKinley was given another shot of painkiller and allowed to waken up. He was taken to the Milburn House, which is just a nearby house, much like Abraham Lincoln was, by electric ambulance. The First Lady had not been told of the president's shooting, and once the surgery was complete, the presidential physician, Presley M. Rixey, gently told her what had occurred. Ida McKinley took the news calmly. She wrote in her diary, "Went to Niagara Falls this morning. My dearest was receiving in a public hall on our return, and he was shot by a," and then ... Leach, in her biography of President McKinley, suggests that the First Lady could not even write the word anarchist. That's how they were reviled in the United States at the time. Within minutes of the shots, the news was all over the world by telegraph, in time for late editions of newspapers in the United States. And this is an era before radio, so thousands stood in cities across the country outside newspaper offices awaiting the latest bulletin from Buffalo. There were fears that McKinley would not survive the day of his shooting, and they were somewhat reassured by bulletins issued by Mr. Cortelyou based on information from the doctors. Large, threatening crowds assembled outside Buffalo Police Headquarters where Czolgosz was being held. Word that he admitted to being an anarchist led to attacks on other anarchists in that belief, and one was nearly lynched in Pittsburgh. Now, at the Milburn House, McKinley seemed to be recovering. On Saturday, the next day, September 7th, McKinley was relaxed. He was conversational. His wife was allowed to see him, as was Cortelyou. The president asked his secretary, how did they like my speech? And was pleased to hear that it had gotten positive reactions. Meanwhile, Vice President Roosevelt, who had been in Vermont, much of the cabinet, and a Senator Hanna hurried to Buffalo. Cortelyou continued to issue encouraging bulletins. The president was permitted few visitors, and he complained of loneliness. As the major crisis seems to have passed, dignitaries started to leave on September 9th. They were confident the president would recover. Roosevelt, he goes on a vacation in the Adirondack Mountains after expressing outrage that Czolgosz might only serve a few years under New York state law for attempted murder. The maximum penalty at the time was 10 years for attempted murder. Attorney General Philander Cox went to Washington searching for a means to bring Czolgosz under federal law. Secretary of State John Hay, been closely associated with the two presidents to be assassinated. He'd been Lincoln's secretary and a close friend of James Garfield. He arrived on September 10th, was met in the station by the organizer of the fair, Babcock, with an account of the president's recovery, and Hay responded, the president's going to die. Cheerful guy there. According to McKinley biographer Margaret Leach, McKinley's apparent recovery was merely the resistance of his strong body to the gangrene that was creeping along the bullet's track through the stomach, the pancreas, and one of his kidneys. Another X-ray machine was sent from New Jersey by its inventor, a fellow by the name of Thomas Edison. It wasn't used on the president, and the varying accounts of why that was. The machine was procured by Cortelyou, that was accompanied by a trained operator, but it wasn't used on orders of the doctors in charge in McKinley's case. And the doctors attempted to test it on a man of about McKinley's size, but it was missing a crucial part, much to Thomas Edison's embarrassment. McKinley had been given nutritive enemas. In other words, enemas containing nutrients. The posterior part of your body actually will absorb things. The Romans used to pour alcohol in there to get drunk, and so they gave him nutritive enemas. And on September 11th, he took some broth by mouth. When it seemed to do him good the following morning, they allowed him toast, coffee, and chicken broth. His subsequent pain was diagnosed as indigestion, and most doctors left after their evening consultation. Early on the morning of September 13th, McKinley suffered a collapse. Urgent word to Buffalo was sent to Vice President Roosevelt, which was 12 miles from the nearest telegraph or telephone in the Adirondack wilderness. Park ranger was sent to find him. Specialists were summoned, although at first some doctors hoped that McKinley might survive with a weakened heart. By afternoon, they knew the case was hopeless. As yet unknown to the doctors, gangrene was growing on the walls of his stomach and toxins passing into his blood. McKinley drifted in and out of consciousness all day, and when he was awake, was a model patient. But by evening, McKinley himself knew he was dying. It is useless, gentlemen. I think we ought to have a prayer. What dignity this guy had. I mean, his friends and family were admitted, and the First Lady sobbed over him. I want to go too. I want to go too. To which her husband replied, we're all going. We're all going. God's will be done, not ours. And with final strength, he put his arm around her. He may have also sung part of his favorite hymn, Nearer My God to Thee, although other accounts have her singing it to him. Ida McKinley was led away. Her place was briefly taken by Senator Hanna. Sometime that terrible evening, Mark Hanna had approached the bedside, tears standing in his eyes, his hands and his head shaking in disbelief that 30 years of friendship could end this way. When a tentative, formal greeting gained no coherent response, that was getting close to be it. 2:15 a.m. on Saturday, September 14th, a little over a week after he'd been shot, President McKinley died. At the time of his death, Roosevelt was on his return journey to Buffalo, racing over the mountain roads by carriage to the nearest railroad station when had a special train waiting for him. When he reached the station at dawn, he learned of McKinley's death. President Roosevelt took the oath of office around 3 o'clock that afternoon, and the oath was administered by U.S. District Judge John R. Hazel. Autopsy was performed later on the morning of McKinley's death, and Mann led a team of 14 physicians. They found the bullet had passed through the stomach, through the transverse colon, and vanished through the peritoneum after penetrating a corner of the left kidney. There were also damages to adrenal glands and the pancreas. Minter, who participated in the autopsy, later stated his belief the bullet lodged somewhere in the back muscles, although this is uncertain because they never, ever found that bullet. After 4 hours, Ida McKinley demanded that the autopsy end. A death mask was taken. That was very, very common in those days. They basically do the plaster of Paris thing and make an impression of your face. A private service took place in the Milburn house before the body was moved to Buffalo City and County Hall for the start of 5 days of national mourning. McKinley's body was ceremoniously taken from Buffalo to Washington, then back home to Canton, Ohio. On the day of the funeral, September 19th, as McKinley was taken from his home on North Market Street for the last time, all activity ceased in the nation for 5 minutes. Trains came to a halt, telephone and telegraph service was stopped, and the people bowed in homage to the president who was gone. By the way, the autopsy also found that the president was suffering from cardiomyopathy, which is a fatty degeneration of the heart muscle. This would have weakened his heart and made him less able to recover from being shot, and was thought to be related to his overweight frame and lack of exercise. Modern scholars generally believe McKinley died of pancreatic necrosis, a condition that is difficult to treat even to this day and would have been completely impossible for doctors of that time. Our good friend Leon Czolgosz, let's put his picture back up here. Our good friend Leon Czolgosz went to trial for the murder of McKinley in the state court in Buffalo on September 23rd, 9 days after the president died. Prosecution testimony took 2 days and consisted principally of the doctors who treated McKinley and various eyewitnesses to the shooting itself. He had a defense attorney. The defense attorney and his co-counsel called no witnesses, which Lewis, in his closing argument, attributed to Czolgosz's refusal to cooperate with him. In his 27-minute address to the jury, Lewis took pains to praise President McKinley. So the defense attorney is praising the president, and the closing argument was more calculated to defend the attorney's place in the community rather than an effort to spare his client from the electric chair. His thing was more like, hey, we have to do this. He has to have a defense. After a bare half hour of deliberations, and a jury member remarked it would have actually been even sooner than that, if not having to had examined some of the evidence, the jury convicted Czolgosz. He was subsequently sentenced to death and was executed by electric chair on October 29th, 1901, so just a touch over a month after his trial. Acid was placed in the casket to dissolve his body before burial in a prison graveyard. They did not like him, and they did not like anarchists. After McKinley's murder, editorials across the country heavily criticized the lack of protection afforded to American presidents. didn't have any legislative mandate, but by 1902, the Secret Service, which was a unit of the Treasury Department, was protecting Theodore Roosevelt full time. This still didn't settle the debate. Some in Congress recommended that the United States Army be charged with protecting the president. In 1906, however, Congress passed legislation officially designating the Secret Service as the agency in charge of presidential security. And at that point, the Secret Service began training not just one, but teams of agents to protect the president. The aftermath of this assassination saw a tremendous backlash against anarchists. The Buffalo police announced after the shooting they believed Czolgosz had not acted alone, and several anarchists were arrested on suspicion of involvement in the attack. Czolgosz mentioned his contacts with Emma Goldman. By the way, there's a really good PBS documentary on Emma Goldman. You should check it out if you get a chance. During the interrogation, authorities arrested her family to give her incentive to turn herself in, which she did on September the 10th, just a couple days after the assassination. She spent nearly 3 weeks in jail. She, like all the other arrestees that were thought to have conspired with Czolgosz, were released without being charged. Anarchist colonies and newspapers were attacked by vigilantes. Although no one was killed, there was considerable property damage. Fear of anarchists led to surveillance programs, which were eventually consolidated in 1908 as the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the beginning of the FBI. Anti-anarchist laws passed in the wake of assassination were dormant before being used during and after World War I. And among those deported in December of 1919 was Goldman, and she never got to come back. Or maybe she did at the very end of her life, but they got rid of her. So the nation experienced a tremendous transition at McKinley's death. Americans were very unsure about the future after this because there was such prosperity and he was such a popular president. They remembered McKinley's firm, unquestioning faith, his kindly, frock-coated dignity, his accessibility. Anybody could meet him, and his dedication to the people. And they wouldn't ever see that again in Washington. You couldn't just walk up to the president anymore. The nation felt like this guy that the convention made vice president is now the president, and that freaked him out quite a bit. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the assassination of William McKinley. There you go. Let's get to your comments. How about that? Looks to me like we've had some activity. Hamhead gifted not one, but two memberships to the Tom Gully Show. Thank you so much, Hamhead. And turn on your gifted memberships coming on right now at the bottom of the screen, youtube.com/@TomGullyShow/allow_gifts. So there you are. There you go. Let me see here. Let me get back to my spots. I don't think I have time to turn on my phone thing. Let's see, Snappy. Aku says, your Canadian accent offends me. I wasn't doing a Canadian accent. Chef is in the house. Hey, Chef, what's going on? Kahuna is here. People waving. It is the most cheerful chat room on the internet, as verified by independent sources. The Reverend says, he reminds me of the penguin. Everybody that wears that kind of tux reminds you of the penguin. People saying hi. 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 Leon Czolgosz sounds treacherous. Joker, you don't know the half of it. Hungus Mungus says, I'm an anarchist. Well, it's not as looked down upon as it used to be. Joker says, Johnny Rotten would have been arrested in New York. Yeah. Well, he is an antichrist. He is an anarchist. He knows what he wants and he knows how to get it. He wants to... Never mind. Their terror is called arachnophobia. I'm going to remind you of Hamhead's generosity. I'm going to remind you again. Thank you so much for doing that, Hamhead. Toby McGrovey's here. Hamhead is receiving the well wishes of a grateful public. Julian Caesar says, I have one of those owl head over Johnson 32s, but unlike the assassination weapon, mine is a snubby. I'm assuming you're saying old piece of junk. I don't think it was particularly expensive weapon back then even. People saying hi. He does look like Pegman with the hat. He does. I can't deny that. The president should have had the Hells Angels protection like Mick, says Joker. Well, they did actually spring into Hells Angels like action when they were hitting him with gun butts. And pummeling him. Mick is doing well. Did you see where Mick, and this might have been last year, actually danced to moves like Jagger? He's like 80. Wanted to show everybody he's still got the moves, and he does. People saying hi. Yeah. Toby, operating bathroom. Yeah, like I said, it looks like a place you make sausage. SG fanboy. He stopped the beating of the man who shot him. Talk about integrity. He was just a classy dude. Diana Bryan said, those O'Briens get everywhere. Yes, they do. Francis O'Brien, long-lost relative of Diana. Compassion sounds more like blood loss. What a concoction. Yes. Strychnine and what was the other one? Strychnine and methadone. Something, I don't know. Shuffle off to Buffalo. He shuffled off in Buffalo. Gangrene, the band from Boston? No, not the band from Boston, and not the defensive line of the New York Jets during the 1970s. Czolgosz sounds like a demon's name. It looks like a demon's name is too. It's CZOLCSOZ. There's a G in there somewhere. Wait, CZOLGOSG. That's how you spell his name. When in Rome, you too, my son, Brutus, et tu. Gilman says, I'm late. You're fine, Gilman. You're fine. Nobody's ever late to the Tom Gully Show. People waving, saying hi. Acid, yikes. Yeah, that's when you know they don't like you when they bury you in acid. Really, Czolgosz was blowback from McKinley supporting the gold standard. The Morgan Belmont syndicate still got what they wanted despite Roosevelt's unexpected elevation. Lucas Malago. Well, it was blowback for a lot of things. Czolgosz was against a lot of things that were precepts of American economics and government. He was a true anarchist. He didn't want any of it. Terry Nee says, sorry, I'm late. You're not late, Terry. Come on. Come on. You're one of your family. There's emojis there. White House Blues by Bill Monroe. Old song about this tragic accident. Julian Caesar says, I didn't know Bill Monroe did a thing. Gilman is not an anarchist. He's a Gullerino. Thank you, Gilman. I appreciate that. Terry Nee said, White House's security now looks surreal, sad. Man, you used to be able to just walk up in there. Toby McGroby says, Terry, welcome back. I was late too, or not late, joined later. Nobody's ever late. Yeah, nobody's ever late. Toby, I hope Tom isn't upset with my tardiness. Far from it, sir. Far from it. I'm not even mad enough to put on my Scarlet Witch face or my Hawkeye face or my just about to snap those people, they know who they are, into dust face, or my Wakanda Forever face. SG, thank you so much for those, man. Thank you so much. That was so nice of you. That just makes me so happy. I love being immortalized without really deserving it. Are there any shows on after this one or during this one? Who knows? I'm not upset with your tardiness, Terry Nee, but you were probably off chasing conspiracies, weren't you? Weren't you? Don't lie to me. All right, let me see here. Scarlet Witch face will give me nightmares. Scarlet Witch is the best. It is pretty good. You took everything from me. I don't even know who you are. You will. Then she starts frying him up. Oh, Rico at 8? Okay, cool. We'll be out of here in 6 minutes, 45 seconds. Rico. Anyway. Oh man, I enjoyed myself so much watching Endgame again today. I like watching the whole fight sequence. There's so many awesome moments. There's just so many. When Thor lights himself up and goes, then we're all in agreement. We'll kill him properly this time. And he turns into lightning-eyed Thor. And then when Cap picks up the hammer. Oh. And when you saw it in the theater, the crowds were just going crazy. Absolutely nuts. There's a portion at the end of Endgame that people have a problem with. And I think it's insane. Oh, Terry Nee says, no. I picked up my wife at work. I was listening to you in my left ear headphones while she went on about something. Glad I could help. Hamhead said, White House Blues is a good song, sort of about McKinley's assassination. Groovy. Well, let's just do a different. Yeah, you guys are. There's no need. Then there's nothing to forgive, right? So you're not even forgiven. So here's the deal. And there's a lot of moments I'm leaving out here, but when Scarlet Witch starts frying Thanos and he says, rain fire, but our troops, sire, just do it. And all that starts coming out of his ship, and then it stops all of a sudden. And Iron Man says, what's going on? And not Jarvis, but the new one, the female one goes, there's something entering the upper atmosphere. And it starts shooting at that, and you realize it's Captain Marvel. And she just goes right through that ship, right through the top, completely destroys it. Peter Parker, meanwhile, has the glove with all of the stones in it. And he's getting bounced around like crazy. And finally the shooting stops, and Captain Marvel comes up to him and he goes, I'm Peter Parker. Hey, Peter Parker, you got something for me? Hands it to her. I don't know how you're going to get through all that. And this problem that people have with all of the badass Marvel Universe women. Don't worry, she'll have help. And all those chicks band together. I think it's awesome. And it's so woke. I'm like, yeah, it's not woke. It's just all the... Anyway. It's so awesome. It's so awesome. And when Thanos headbutts Captain Marvel and she doesn't even move, she's just looking at him like, is that all you got? Is that all you got? There's just so many good. But you guys, that movie now has a new meaning to me when he goes, Avengers, assemble. Oh, it just means so much now. Let's see here. Update on the Watcher channel. They backpedaled on the idea of completely leaving YouTube, made it obvious it was all about money. Well, you can make money on YouTube. They could. Let's see here. Say goodnight, Gracie. Goodnight, Gracie. Dupa Karen Garvey says, I was hoping someone would do some Gully fan art. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Not a huge fan of the Marvel movies. Iron Man saying, and I am Iron Man. Generally gave me goosebumps. It was so cool. Toby says, well, I like being here live to chat. We love having you and to show support. We love having you. Sorry, Tom, I sense your anger. I won't be late again. I don't have any anger in me while I'm doing this show, except for YouTube telling me my comments are spam. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but 5 times in the pre-show. Aku says they will do content on their platform for paying subs, and then a week or so later free on YouTube. Well, good. Doopa-doopa-doo. Karen Garvey. Everybody loves Karen Garvey. People saying hi. Hungus Mungus says, good night, people. Good night, Hungus Mungus. Gilman says, love you, Tom. The momentum you're getting is great. Gullarinos, good night. Thank you so much, Gilman. I appreciate it. If we do need more momentum, please like, share, subscribe, follow, notification bell. We need more people. We need to get more subscribers. We need just free people. That's all we need. We just need more free people here on YouTube. Right now we got 16 on YouTube, 5 on Twitter. And, you know, Twitter, we love you, Twitter. Sorry, X. We love you, X. It's the only X I still love. But you can participate in the chat and things. If you were on Facebook, you could also participate in chat. But they don't let you do that on X. So watch it. We love you watching it on Twitter. But if you come here, you do get to participate in the most cheerful chat room on the internet as verified by independent sources. Aku Mugen says, to quote them, we wanted to do a TV level quality on YouTube, forgetting that TV shows are dying. Well, there's a lot of quality TV level stuff on YouTube. TV shows put their own stuff on YouTube now. So I'm not mad at those guys. They're pretty awesome. Good night, Gilman. Cute doggo. People laughing. Good night, everybody. Aku says, sometimes I feel like a nut. Yeah, but sometimes you don't. Almond Joyous got nuts. Mounds don't. Because sometimes you feel like a nut. Thanks, Toby. I got 30 seconds until Rico. So I'm going to close this baby out. You can get to Rico. I can get to Rico. We can all Rico out. And I guess other than you people are the best, love you. Thank you for being here. I'll be here tomorrow. Hope you will be too. Till next time. We'll see you next time.